Welcome in to another edition of Gold and Black Radio. I'm your host, Derek Schultz. Purdue men's basketball fell from the ranks of the unbeaten with a thud. They got blasted by Iowa State after opening the Big Ten season with a road win at Rutgers last week. We'll talk about those results and a big week ahead as the Boilers play another conference opponent and get a return game against Marquette, both at Mackey Arena. Brian Neubert, the real expert on this show, is going to join us here in just a bit. But first, a big thank you to our tremendous Gold and Black sponsors that make this show possible, including Purdue Federal Credit Union, a proud partner at Purdue Athletics, and the official credit card for Purdue fans. Boiler Up, East End Grill and Ripple & Company, two distinctive bistros across the street from one another on the far end of Main Street, the perfect place for your next event. The Whitaker Inn. This Midwestern oasis is perfect for relaxing staycation or a weekend getaway. Escape from the ordinary at the Whitaker Inn. Sand Valley Resort, ready for a winter getaway? Discover the stillness and beauty of Sand Valley. Our stunning 12,000-acre landscape is the perfect place to explore, whether you're cross-country skiing, enjoying a quiet walk, or just relaxing by the fire. With thoughtfully designed accommodations and nourishing dining, Sand Valley is the place to reconnect with yourself and those you love. Find your winter retreat at sandvalley.com. And the Purdue Institute for Cancer Research. The Purdue Institute for Cancer Research has a history of innovation and one goal for the future: defeat cancer. Purdue brings together world-class Boilermaker scientists from all across the university, conducting cutting-edge research that uncovers new ways to prevent, diagnose, and treat cancer. With your support, cancer research saves lives. Join the fight and donate to the Purdue Institute for Cancer Research today. As I mentioned, the real expert on the show, he's goldenblack.com columnist and basketball scribe Brian Neubert, and he joins us now here on Gold and Black Radio. And Brian, I try to be like glass half full with this stuff. It's a marathon, not a sprint. Pull out whatever cliche that you want following a loss. But I do think that there is benefit to get a wake-up call, even if it's a very harsh wake-up call, which certainly Saturday's game against Iowa State was. Usually Purdue is the one that is the Mackey buzzsawer, and instead they were the buzzsawed this past weekend. I know there were many factors that contributed to that runaway loss, but was there something that stood out to you as particularly problematic moving forward?
Well, what stood out to me was how good Iowa State is. I mean, how hard it is to do that to Purdue in Purdue's building is what kind of led me kind of walking away thinking, hey, that was more about Iowa State announcing itself as a great basketball team as it was Purdue being exposed as a fraud or hit the panic button or whatever all the YouTube graphics were from people who are waiting to dunk on Purdue all off season. But no, Iowa State was great. Purdue, shockingly, didn't show a hell of a lot of toughness. They didn't defend well. They didn't respond well. They didn't have a lot of poise. I thought, the sort of pressure Iowa State applies, I thought Purdue was the most Iowa State-proof team in college basketball because of Braden Smith and their collective basketball IQ. But those guys couldn't really figure it out. Had they made some threes, it might have been different, but still that they could have just made some threes and they still wouldn't have had all that much of a solution for all the problems Iowa State posed. And Iowa State posed a hell of a lot of them. They played really hard. They played really physical. They got under Purdue's skin clearly, and they rattled a team that is very, very rarely rattled on its home floor, no less. And whether you want to view that as a sign of trouble ahead, overreacting to one game in college basketball is always a very, very dangerous business. That might have been the best Iowa State plays all year. That might have been the worst Purdue plays all year. And I think that's probably likelier than, Purdue going in some sort of funk here now. So I think losses like this are kind of better contextualized in hindsight. So it's kind of what Purdue makes of it now is, as I always say about this Purdue team, is that this is a group of guys who have made themselves into what they are based on proving people wrong and always trying to prove themselves to somebody or something. And now's their shot because, they were just made to look really, really bad on their home floor when they were the centerpiece game of the weekend. And if people want to pile on them, they just got all of the ammo they could possibly want. So if Purdue's looking for people being critical of them or whatever, they got it right now. So if they respond angry and they come out angry and they come out angst-ridden and pissy, that might be, for lack of a better term, pardon my French, that is actually the scientific basketball word, pissy. they might be better off for it. I'm not just trying to put a happy face on a really bad loss. That is not my job nor my desire, but it is, something that if there was any toxic traits setting in terms of vanity or overconfidence or anything like that, they're out the window. So it's up to Purdue now to reprove itself. And they've always been kind of better as the underdog. And I'm not saying they're the underdog now, but they've certainly been put in a very different position than they entered the season in.
Trey Kaufman's scoring numbers hadn't been great, but he had still been efficient from the field, and obviously 1 of 8, and just that disastrous first half was an exception to that rule so far this season. But we kind of saw it, Brian, with the foul situation in the Bahamas against Memphis, and then just I think with how he was taken out of the game. Is there some concern of him? I don't know if getting rattled is the right term, or just kind of allowing himself to sometimes be taken out in stretches when, that's a guy that's a senior leader and potential All-American.
Well, I thought it was really hard for him to get touches. I thought that was a reflection of the overall operation, the overall offensive operation, something that Purdue's always been able to figure out on the fly because it has a supercomputer playing point guard. But I also think that Iowa State was so quick to the ball and had 2 guys on the ball instantaneously. And I felt like Trey Kaufman-Renn was almost playing like he was planning on having to get hit. And he was planning on contact being there. I'm not saying he was playing to get fouled. I'm saying he was playing to have to finish through contact and almost kind of rushing things a little bit. I think the whole offense was sped up. I think Fletcher Lawyer shot some threes that made him look sped up. I think a lot of the open threes Purdue missed, might have been a function of the overall panic that was kind of seemed to be setting in with the offensive operation. Kaufman-Renn just really couldn't finish around the basket. They only got him a couple of clean short roll touches, things like that. Iowa State deserves a lot of credit for that. There were a couple of times they had 3 people guarding 2 people in that ball screen action, and Purdue couldn't make him pay elsewhere. But he has been. There have been games in his career where he has kind of lost his composure, lost his poise. The game in the Bahamas was obviously a pretty good example of that against Memphis. Penn State last year was a good example. For a guy who spends as much mental energy on his own mental state, his own mental preparation, it does kind of belie that. But I don't know if this was one of those games. I think it was just a deal where they did a great job defending him, and Purdue couldn't come up with ways to make him more productive than he ended up being.
As strange as it sounds, because it was a 23-point loss, if you had given me a scenario where Purdue had to lose 1 game last week, I would have chosen that, even in a runaway, than flopping at Rutgers, which we have seen them do. That said, this has been kind of a trend for the Boilers, right? This first December week to sort of fall in their face, whether it's a lesser Big Ten opponent on the road or it's somebody like Iowa State that just kind of comes in and outclasses them, even if maybe that's the first example of that happening. Why do you think that that's been the case? Is it a post-MTE hangover thing? Is it just basketball season randomness? Why is it like this particular week it feels like we're always talking about a split, a 1-1?
Well, ordinarily, it's been on the road, and that's probably had something to do with the fact that, Purdue's been on short turnarounds from very challenging non-conference schedules, going on the road for the first time, normally as a very highly ranked opponent, into the arena of somebody it's better than, thus making for an atmosphere where people want to rush the floor. So there's a little bit more of a mania to that. Whether it was Nebraska, Penn State, Northwestern, Rutgers. This was kind of different. This was, if there's one qualifier to put on this, and there was no other story other than Iowa State being the markedly better team in this game. There was no officiating qualifier. There was no injury qualifier. There was no scheduling quirk qualifier. But you have to take games like this when you can get them scheduling-wise. Having this game after your Big Ten opener and before your second Big Ten game, probably wasn't ideal. Purdue needed that Rutgers game desperately. They could not lose that game. They had to put everything they had into that Rutgers game. Having to come back on relatively short turnaround for Iowa State, which obviously is a very difficult team to prepare for, that wasn't ideal. So scheduling these games between Big Ten games in December from here on out might require some pause. But to get these games, you have to get them when you can get them. So I don't know if Purdue had any choice in the matter as to when Iowa State would come visit, but having it after your Big Ten opener on the road really wasn't ideal. But that said, Iowa State was so much better than Purdue that they could have played this game, at 4:00 in the morning, and it probably would have been the same result. But no, it's you don't see this at home with Purdue. It's a huge credit to Iowa State, probably more so than it is an indictment of Purdue. But nevertheless, anytime you kind of no-show a second half the way Purdue did, when you lose your poise the way Purdue did, it does raise a couple of red flags. Normally that has happened to Purdue around this time of year, but it's always been on the road. And that's really the big surprise of all of this. But you are correct. If you had to split the two games this week, you needed that Big Ten road opener. I've been talking about that as the most important game of the season for months now, just because you are a Big Ten championship capable team this year. When you have teams like this, you need to back it up with championships. And starting 0-1 in the Big Ten again with a bad road loss would have been, would have triggered everyone's gag reflexes. So at the end of the day, Iowa State would have been a great win. It would have been a great line on the resume, but it doesn't affect your chances at a Big Ten championship. You're still going to have a chance to play your way into a number one seed. It's I don't want to say it's not that big a deal, but relative to the options you had last week from a loss perspective, this was the preferable one.
Minnesota is coming off a home win against Indiana, but that's really not a very good basketball team. They're sub 100 still in the Ken Palm. They were picked to finish in the basement of the league with Rutgers. And then you got Marquette, who's off to a very rocky start. They barely survived Valpo in overtime last week. They're 0-4 against Power 4 teams. I can't imagine that this snowballs into a Mackey losing streak. Is this a get-right week for Purdue with these two back-to-back opponents?
Yeah, I would love to tell you about Minnesota, but I have no idea. I have no idea. I don't know a lot about any of these Big Ten teams anymore with all these new players, all these new coaches. I didn't get to watch the Indiana game. I think there was some conflict that night when they played, so I didn't get to watch it. I've seen enough of Marquette to know that they are not even remotely close to what Purdue signed up for when they inked that home and home with them. They got what they bargained for last year in Milwaukee, but this now might not be a good win when it's all said and done. You expect when Marquette comes to your place, that's going to be a quad one, at worst a quad two. Who knows now? They obviously have been trying to do things the same way that Purdue has done things in terms of building through freshmen and not really retooling every year through the portal in terms of their best players. And they've just fallen on their face this year. It looks like they just don't have the guys. And last year they had a bunch of dudes you really had to worry about. The year before that, they had a bunch of dudes you really had to worry about. Now it just looks like the cupboard's bare. And Shaka Smart's going to have to either change and go portal crazy, or hope that he can go get the right freshman next year and keep those guys and keep his job long enough to get it back to where he's always had it.
Final thought here, and we didn't talk any football last week with good reason, considering what the bucket game result is. But now we're into the offseason, and you're about to be talking about the portal and all that, and guys are already kind of making themselves available. I know that you had talked about this in three thoughts, but just the quarterback position and how big of an offseason that this is for Barry Odom. Is there one thing that you're focusing on? And is it, in fact, the quarterback position and what they end up doing there? Or are there some other areas that you're looking at as, obviously there are a lot of areas to address, but something that stands out to you as Odom embarks on his first true offseason as Purdue head coach? Because it was just such a fire drill last year with him coming in and the portal window being different and and just kind of having to do everything on the fly. If there is an advantage to this season, I feel like at least he can kind of grab his bearings, have the sample size of this season to know what he has with some of these guys, and then really sort of make a more deliberate blueprint and approach to building a roster for 2026.
Yeah, I think they have to be able to score. I think that's really, really groundbreaking analysis right there. If they are committed to Ryan Brown as their quarterback, and Ryan Brown is coming back, all indications are both are true. Malachi Singleton going into the portal is a pretty good indication. Purdue's pretty committed to Ryan Brown. Then quarterback development becomes priority number one here, because I think Ryan Brown started this season and ended this season as a better football player than a quarterback, if that makes sense. I think he's a guy who can be a playmaker with his athleticism. I think he's a guy who can be a spark with his competitiveness, but you need a little bit more quarterback acumen there in terms of game management, in terms of improving in the things that Purdue needs him to be good at, in terms of the read option, decision-making, things like that. You'd love for him to become that guy who can drop back and make an accurate throw 9 times out of 10 on, 3rd and long. I'm not sure that's ever going to be his thing. But you just got to do the best job possible developing him, but building the offense around him and playing to whatever strengths you see in him, sort of coming out of the spring. He didn't have spring last year. He will have spring this year. That will be helpful. But you also got to get him some help. The receivers have to catch the freaking ball. I think that's the simplest way to assess receiver play possible, is do they catch the ball? And there were way too many, drops this year. The offensive line, the pass protection, and part of that is play calling in terms of protecting the passer. All of that stuff has to be better. I thought Josh Henson did a pretty decent job this year as the offensive coordinator. Not many people will agree with me, because the offensive coordinator is always the softest target possible, but I thought his scheme made sense. I thought it played to Purdue's strengths. It covered up its weaknesses, and the fine line between strength and weakness was always they were always kind of dancing back and forth between one another. But I think that Purdue's got to get, if they're committed to Brown, they got to get him some help. He's got to have a better infrastructure around him. It would help to have some sort of playmaker somewhere on that offense. They don't right now. Nitro Tuggle, okay. I think Michael Jackson's gone, isn't he? I can't keep it all straight.
I haven't seen him officially enter yet, at least on the Golden Black.
Well, I think he was a senior.
Oh, is he? Oh, geez.
I don't know.
Yeah.
They got to get some speed on that offense. They got to get some guys who can make people miss. They got to get people who can get open.
Yeah, that's correct, by the way.
Against good defense. And all this stuff's pretty obvious. I just didn't think they had any juice on offense last year. Didn't have any punch. I think you just need somebody on that offense to make Ryan Brown better, but also make defenses worry. Who did you have to really worry about when you were building a game plan to defend Purdue this year? That's why this portal cycle is immensely important. That's why player development is immensely important. But the portal thing is the more instant gratification oriented part of that. So Purdue's got to do a good job finding some, to quote Danny Hope, difference makers from an offensive perspective, and make Ryan Brown a better player than he was this year. You can't live with the game changing mistakes at quarterback the way you did this year. Purdue should have won 4 games this year. That still wouldn't have been much, but it would have been something. And 2 of those games went by the wayside because of critical errors.
Yep.
At the quarterback position, and you just can't go on like that unless you're scoring 30 a game, and that one play doesn't matter as much as it did this year. So they've got a lot of work to do offensively, making their players better, but also bringing in better players.
Very interesting in this new world of college football. I had forgotten that players were allowed to just have their eligibility expire. I did not, he's a senior. Oh, wait, he's not going to be here anymore. It's not by their choice.
If he wanted to play college football until he was 30, I'm sure they could find a way.
He could probably appeal enough and end up doing that. You're right about that. You can follow Brian at Brian Neubert on X and get his thoughts, writings, analysis, and snark. Also, you can do so by becoming a goldenblack.com subscriber. Appreciate the insights, Brian, and we will talk to you again next week.
No problem, Derek. Thanks, man.
That's our pal Brian Neubert, goldenblack.com columnist, basketball knower. And that's our show. This edition of Golden Black Radio brought to you by our tremendous sponsors, Purdue Federal Credit Union, the official credit card for Purdue fans, East End Grill and Ripple & Company, two distinctive bistros across the street from one another on the far end of Main Street in Lafayette. The Whitaker Inn for unparalleled comfort and cuisine. Visit the Whitaker Inn. By Sand Valley Resort with thoughtfully designed accommodations and nourishing dining. Sand Valley is the place to reconnect with yourself and those you love. Find your winter retreat at sandvalley.com. And the Purdue Institute for Cancer Research, which has a history of innovation and one goal for the future: defeat cancer. Join the fight and donate to the Purdue Institute for Cancer Research today. Don't forget to hit the like and subscribe buttons. And of course, you can leave a 5-star review and comment on your favorite podcast platform. We would really appreciate it. Thanks for those of you who have already done so. Be sure to enable alerts as well, as we upload new content just about every day on all of those channels. And while you're at it, why not subscribe to goldenblack.com? Duh. If you're not already, what are you doing? Join the biggest Purdue community on the internet. You get Knucklehead Central. You get Brian. You get offseason football with Tom Dienhart and Dub Jellison. And you get Carm. You get Jordan. You get me. You get Alan. You get the whole crew at goldenblack.com by becoming a subscriber. It really is the absolute best place for Boilermaker fans to unite, to gripe, to celebrate, to commiserate, to go through all of the range of promotions that we know Purdue fans end up going through with some strangers on the internet. That's the best way to operate, right, as a sports fan. Subscribe now at goldenblack.com. When we return next week, we will recap both games, the Big Ten game against Minnesota, and then, of course, Purdue stepping out of non-conference into the non-conference to take on Marquette, who is in Milwaukee. Both of those games at Mackey Arena, we'll recap those with Brian next week. And if other portal news or Purdue football news pops up, we'll be sure to cover that as well. And we'll continue that cadence throughout the rest of basketball season. And the Purdue football news filters in as it comes. We'll, of course, tackle that, no pun intended, as well, right here on Golden Black Radio. But until next Tuesday, I'm Derek Schultz. I hope you enjoyed it. And this has been Golden Black Radio here on goldenblack.com. Have a great week. As you all know by now, Golden Black Radio has also teamed up with BetMGM this season. We'll be using BetMGM lines to make all our picks, and we'll have special offers for our listeners each week. When you join BetMGM, you get access to a variety of parlay selection features like same-game parlays, live betting options, and more. If you haven't signed up for BetMGM yet, use bonus code ON3 and you'll get up to a $1,500 first bet. Offer on your first wager with BetMGM. Here's how it works. Download the BetMGM app and sign up using bonus code ON3. Deposit at least $10 and place your first wager on any game. You will receive up to $1,500 in bonus bets if your bet loses. Just make sure you use bonus code ON3 when you sign up. Make this college football season one for the history books. Make it legendary. See BetMGM.com for terms. 21 and over only. U.S. promotional offers not available in New York, Nevada, Ontario, or Puerto Rico. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. First bet offer for new customers only, subject to eligibility requirements. Rewards are non-withdrawable bonus bets that can expire in 7 days. In partnership with Kansas Crossing Casino and Hotel. Don't forget, if you haven't signed up for BetMGM yet, use bonus code ON3 and get your $1,500 first bet offer today.